move through 45 minutes, give or take how much I talk, for a yin practice. And I thought it'd be a really nice way to review all of the yamas. And the yamas are our observances that we can do to help us live better lives. They're from the 8 limbs of yoga. And it's said that if you're not practicing the yamas and the niyamas, you're not really doing yoga. I'd also even say that if you're not firmly established in practicing the yamas and niyamas, success and spirituality will be harder or more difficult for you to attain. The benefits of your practice will not be as deep or meaningful. So they're pretty important. And I just love talking about them and thinking about them and trying to remind myself to practice them. It's really, really hard work, but it's worth it. All right, so I have a little something to read, just to set the tone. The yamas are like our personal GPS. They tell us when we're going in the wrong direction, and they let us know when we're making a negative impact on the world, and invite us to turn around and take a step towards harmony instead. The yamas require familiarity and a daily practice. The yamas address the fact that we are social creatures, alive on a planet full of other life forms, where we need to learn to live together and share the goods. The yamas, or restraints, invite us into an adult relationship with the world, where we can see past our own needs and into the collective good. The yamas pull us back from needing so much that is external, and point us towards the unique expression of our own life. It is here that we feel the excitement and joy of living. I'd like to review them, but while I'm reviewing the yamas, if you could make sure that you're in a comfortable seat with a tall spine. Any comfortable seat will be great to start, and you're just working on building your endurance to sit still and to keep your attention on something. And for now, it can be my voice. Starting with ahimsa, or non-violence. This turns us from harming self and others, and turns us towards kindness and compassion for self and others. Satya, or truthfulness, turns us from lies and half-truths to expressing our uniqueness and authenticity. Asteya, non-stealing, turns us from theft to cultivating new skills and abilities. Non-access turns us from greed to appreciation and pleasure without excess. Non-possessiveness turns us from attachment to intimacy without possession. It's hard to do all that work in a day or in a practice, but that's okay. If we are aware of the fact that there's work to be done and that we may have to remind ourselves continuously to do the work, then we're on the right path. Let's get started. From your comfortable seat, if we could just swing the feet around into a child's pose to start, and if we could start with knees narrow, ankle bones touching, inner thighs touching, arms stretched out long, forehead resting on something. As you allow yourself to settle into your child's pose, close down the eyes and listen to the sound of your breath. If possible, start to cultivate a very soft, gentle Ujjayi breath. Where you're getting the restriction at the back of the throat, you may feel a soft vibration. It may sound like Darth Vader, wind through the trees, or ocean waves. And we'll keep our focus on the sound of the breath, trying to create a very rhythmical, steady pattern that we can sink our way into. And we'll start to cultivate the sensation or the principle of ahimsa. As you settle into your breath and into the shape, notice if there are restrictions in the body, whether it's the hips or the feet or the arms or the shoulders, that are causing discomfort. And can you make a shift so that you can stay in the general shape, but stay there with greater ease and comfort? And this is where we'll stay for another couple minutes. Make the intention to stay completely attached to or harnessed to the sound of your breath. As you start to rise up, keep listening to the sound, keep noticing the quality of the breath, and we're going to step the left foot forward between the hands. Stay connected with the sound of the breath, and gently adjust the back knee until you can come into your dragon pose. Feel free to add extra padding under the back shin or the back knee. You may also want to have blocks or blankets underneath the hands. Options are to stay right here with your hands down, or you can bring your forearms up to the forward knee or thigh. Really important that if you do rise up to this level that you keep a little bit of firmness to the belly so that you're protecting the low back. And if it becomes quite a strain for you to be here, then to lower your hands back down. Our goal or our hope for our practice today is to stay connected with all of the yamas as we go through them, layering them on top of each other. Our first one was ahimsa, and you can cultivate that by staying connected to the sound of your breath and gently modifying your shape or your position or the length of your hold so that there's no harm being done to yourself. And we practice that by even noticing discomfort. Normally I would say pain or injury, but why not practice it a couple levels back with just discomfort? Can I make myself more comfortable in the shape? And we'll stay connected with ahimsa throughout every practice and every pose, and we'll keep layering on top. So for this one, I'd like you to now start to layer on top of ahimsa, no harming, satya, truthfulness. And this might be challenging for us to acknowledge whether or not we're being honest with ourselves about how we're feeling in a shape. Do we feel like we have to have our arms up even though we are more comfortable with the hands down? And where does that thought come from? Is it because we think higher is better, more sensation is better? Or do we really feel like, no, this is where I feel good, like I can stay here, I can relax, I don't feel like I'm compromising anything. And so keep asking yourself the question, am I being honest with myself, or is this a preset pattern that I have to push myself into areas where I think I need to be, rather than really listening to how my body's feeling, where my energy's at, and where my thoughts are. We've got a little bit longer to stay here. Keep connected with the breath if possible. Listen to the sound. Make it really steady and rhythmical. And know that you always have permission to come out of a pose, move around, come back in. If your hands have come up, we're going to bring them back down to the floor. And very gently start to ease your hips back, nice and slow. The hands again could be on props or to the floor. We're going to straighten the front leg. You may choose to pull your toes back. And you're going to choose carefully where you're going to fold forward to, what degree of sensation. And we're going to hold here. Using the hands as support. You want a nice strong straight back, firmness through the belly. Front leg may not have gone all the way straight, that's okay. We don't want it locked. Little micro bend or a deeper bend if you're really tight. And we're going to hold. Before we transition out of this shape, I'd like you to take a moment to gently rock your hips first to one side, then through center and to the other side. Notice how the sensation in the back of your hamstring shifts. You're moving from targeting the inner hamstring to the center to the outer. You may have one or the other that's quite tight or restricted in relation to the other ones. And it may serve you to have your hips slightly over to one side, maybe even letting the front foot rock over to the other side so that we can target a slightly different part of the hamstring. You may not feel any difference. Maybe they're all really even. But if you do find one that's tighter than the others, maybe spending a bit more time holding the shape where you got that perfect amount of sensation, not too much, not too little. From here, we're going to move into very similar to what we did before this. So the front knee will bend again. And when we were doing our dragon pose, probably had our knee pretty close to being over top of ankle, maybe a little ahead or a little behind. Now I want you to actually accentuate the knee going quite far forward. The tip is to not let your heel lift. So we're working on flexion through the front of the ankle. And what's really interesting that I learned recently from actually my son who plays soccer through a physiotherapist was that this ability to hinge forward from the ankle can really affect how our knees and our hips function. And interestingly enough, I found that I have one ankle that is incredibly locked up. It has very little mobility. So I've been working really hard to try to increase the flexibility and the flexion. It might be interesting for you to discover if you have that same situation, and it might explain issues with the knees or the hips. So let's see. You're going to keep the heel down. You may have to actually physically watch it or even hold it. Inch your back knee forward, letting your front knee move over the toes. And we're going to see how far we can move the knee forward without lifting the heel. And this can be done in lots of different ways, but I wanted to do it with the floor for support today. And you're going to go to where you can hold. Use your hands for support. And keep pressing or keep monitoring that the back heel hasn't lifted. And then we'll hold. And what I find really interesting about this is, and it comes to our next yama, is not stealing. When we are taught about yoga postures, we're given some pretty strong guidelines as to alignment. And one of the things that was really drilled into us was to make sure that students' knees never went out past the ankle or past the toes. And there is good reason for that in certain postures. We want to be targeting certain muscles, and we don't want to be compromising anyone's knees. However, if we don't put our bodies into these different shapes, we'll never discover where we are maybe not lacking, but things that we can discover of our body. So we're depriving ourselves of those opportunities to learn. So this is a very safe way to explore the range of motion. Your ankle, you've got your hands down, your back knee is down. You're only going to where you can keep the back heel down. Quite safe. Wouldn't do this in another pose. Maybe a standing pose would be too much, but here it is safe. And that's another thing to layer onto our practice. So first starting with non-harming. So we're not going to go to where there's a sharp pain or a lot of bone-on-bone discomfort. We're going to be honest about how things feel and adjust or move out of the pose if we need to. And then being okay with letting us have this new experience. So if this has never been something that you've tried before, why rob yourself of that experience, right? So we're just going to stay for a couple more breaths. I find that it's very easy to get stuck into this world of right and wrong, of black and white. And I've always lived in a very gray world, so my rights and wrongs are always fluid and changing. Other people's aren't, and it's hard for us to communicate effectively. To ease out of this, walk your hands back and ease the hips back so that there's less pressure. And we're going to step the left foot back. And you can take a moment to move the hips around, perhaps some hip rotations, maybe a downward facing dog, or stretching your legs out behind you. And if you've got strain on the wrists, maybe coming to sit on the heels and massaging the wrists. And we'll move right away into the other side. Right foot comes forward, hands are framing the front foot. Again, we're starting with knee over ankle in our dragon pose. Adjusting the back knee until you've got sensation, you know you're making changes to the body, got information coming in. Not too much, not too little. Non-harming, with truthfulness, and then giving yourself the ability or the opportunity to have a new experience. Or maybe that is experimenting with keeping your hands down or bringing your arms up. You know, can you stay with having the firmness in the belly? And are you just taking my word for that, or are you exploring, like, what happens if you do let your belly go soft? What happens to the body? How does that feel? And is it something that you want to explore? And being told something and just doing it is very different than being told something, questioning it, experiencing it, and then making a decision based on the information you received. But we'll hold here in our dragon, going back to, again, noticing the sound of your breath, closing down the eyes as often as you need to stay connected with what's happening, the sensations and the sounds. And we'll hold. You have brought your hands up to the thigh. We're going to return the hands to the floor and ease the hips gently back, straightening the front leg. Perhaps you'll choose to lift your toes up off the floor, adjusting the placement of your hands so that you can create the fold over the straight leg. And just like we did on the other side, perhaps even starting with the rocking of the hips side to side, notice if you've got more tension to the outer part of your hamstring or to the inner part, or maybe it's the center, maybe it's all three. And then making sure that you get sensation through all of the hamstrings. Being mindful, being careful, and we'll hold. Just a few more breaths. Now we're going to start to bend back into the forward knee, easing our way forward. And again, we'll go into taking our knee as far forward as possible without letting the heel lift off the floor. Walk the hands forward, inch the back knee forward. And you may have to be quite careful. The heel is very reluctant to stay down sometimes. And you're going to go back through the yamas, making sure that you are paying attention, non-harming, truthfulness, non-stealing. Don't deny yourself an opportunity for an experience. And we can add on brahmacharya, moderation. So in our yin, we get to practice that a lot. Finding the middle ground, not too much, not too little of something. You can also think of it as God's eye view. I like that one. Imagine looking at yourself from up above, so that we get a bigger picture of what's going on, of noticing, paying attention. And I think the beauty of yoga comes from the ability to notice things about ourselves that otherwise we have to wait for someone else to point out. And that can be a little unwelcome or uncomfortable coming from someone else. But when you discover it for yourself, like, oh my God, I'm always saying that, or I'm always doing that, and where does that come from? Well, that's a completely different learning experience than if somebody tells you that you are a nag, or you repeat yourself, or whatever it is that you get told. While you're here, it'd be interesting just to make note if you do have a difference between the two sides in the amount of forward movement of your knee and flexion through the front of the ankle. There are some other shapes that we can create that are easier to measure and tell the difference, but we'll do that another time. And I think it's important to mention that when you discover differences from one side to the other, or I'll use myself as an example. This is my bad ankle. It's very challenging for me to get my knee to go as far forward. It may not look it from here, but it's there. It's real for me, and it's nothing that I can necessarily change or fix. It's probably the result of having broken my ankle a couple times as a kid, and just the way things healed and the shoes that I wore, and very likely that it's the way things heal that are now creating like an impingement, and I'd have to go through surgery and re-break it. But just having that knowledge or that information, then I know that I have to work a little harder on the things that I can change. I can influence the muscles, I can influence the connective tissue to a certain degree, and I can be more aware of how I move and why I might have to build strength in other areas to compensate for something that I can't change. So it's always information that then we have opportunity to make choices of. Let's start to slowly ease our way back. Again, we'll go into tabletop, where we can move the hips, move the spine, stretch out the legs. Trust your instincts to move in the right way. Once you've moved, we'll counteract the forward motion of our legs by coming to sit with the knees nice and close together, the ankles close together, toes untucked, and come back to sit on the heels. You can use this as an opportunity to rotate the wrists or stretch to the shoulders or a couple of circles of the neck. Now, if you're already feeling a nice sensation or stretch to the tops of the feet and you're good here, you just stay. If you feel like you want to add on and you want a bit more sensation through the tops of the feet, you can use blocks, or you can maybe bring your hands to the floor. Maybe some sort of support behind you, just to have something a little bit higher to come onto. You're going to lean back. And you're going to keep the action of squeezing the thighs and the ankles together so they don't flare out. And you're going to lift the knees. So as soon as you lift your knees, you're going to feel the sensation, crack, there goes my ankle, of stretching the tops of your feet. So just notice what's going on with your body, how this feels. If it feels like it's not a good place to be, then of course you lower down. If you feel like, oh, finally get to stretch that part of my foot, this feels so good, you stay. This is our ankle stretch in Yin Yoga. Gently release if you've lifted your knees. You can come back into tabletop, rotate the ankles. They might feel different. You can point and flex the feet, scrunch the toes, open the toes. And we're going to come back down into that one more time. Again, toes will be untucked. Keep them nice and close together. Bring the hips back to the heels. And second time coming in might be better, might be stronger sensation, so monitor carefully. Option again is to just sit and let the weight of your upper body come down through the feet, or taking your hands back, leaning back, and then choosing to lift the knees should you choose to. Making sure that it feels safe. You might lift the knees higher, second time might be even lower. You might feel things in one foot or ankle versus the other. And we'll release. Come back upright, back into tabletop. Where one more time you can move the feet and the ankles around. going to turn this way so that it's easier for you to see. From tabletop, we're now going to go into the wrists a little bit. Fingertips typically pointing forward. I'm going to ask you to point the fingertips to the side of your mat. Well, they're at like 3 o'clock and 9 o'clock. And you're going to allow your weight to shift from side to side. As your weight shifts, you'll notice that there's compression, pressing down through the wrist joint, and also you are flexing through the wrist. You can always take your hands wider or narrower. You can have your weight heavier through the wrist or lighter by sending your hips further back. You may feel like you want to stay on one wrist versus the other. Come back to center. Same orientation, we're just going to flip so that the palms are now up. Fingertips will be facing each other. You're going to have your hips fairly far back so that you can set your hands. Fingertips face each other. And then letting your weight gently shift back forward. You're in control of how much weight you let go down to the wrists. And when you feel comfortable, you can sway again side to side. Now, if you've had a wrist injury or a chronic condition, this might be very uncomfortable. So you would modify with less flexion through the wrist or less weight coming onto the wrist. Being careful and mindful, being honest. I will release the weight back, come off your wrists, and gentle circles. One last movement for the wrist. Again, coming into tabletop, fingertips face towards your knees. You can come down one wrist at a time. Fingertips are now facing back towards you. And again, you'll let your weight shift, perhaps back, and seeing if you can keep the heel of your hand down, similar to how we worked with the ankle. We are stretching the connective tissue, but we're also compressing bone to bone. And we don't want to do too much, but we do want to stimulate the tissues and the bones to strengthen. We want to increase mobility, increase circulation. So, interestingly, I also broke my right wrist falling off of a horse. And so I know that I have bone fragments in my wrist and a different range of motion than before. It didn't heal super great. So I'm aware of it and I modify and adjust, and quite often that's the wrist that gets sore the fastest. And probably at some point in my future there will be arthritis in the joint. So I want to keep them healthy. One more time, come back off your wrists, move them around. And the next wrist movement we won't do from tabletop, so you can sit on your heels. Let your arm or your hand come out in front, fingertips down. Very gently pull the fingers back. We want to feel this through the top of the wrist and through the top of the forearm. And we'll switch. And release, little circles, massage the wrist joint. And we'll move on to our legs again. So swinging the feet out in front. We're going to move into our shoelace pose. Have props handy just in case. We're going to start with the right leg being on top. So the left leg is straight, right knee comes up over top of left knee. This is our option number 1. You may need to adjust your hips or add a little lift if you need to. Options are to sit tall and upright, working on your posture and just enjoying the sensations through your hip and through the back of your straight leg. Another option is to intensify the sensations by folding forward. You can use your hands for support, you could have bolsters out in front, you can go forward with a straight back, or you can let yourself soften and round forward. So lots of options for going forward. If you feel like you want more sensation or you want to work on both hips at the same time, it's the bottom leg that you're going to bend and fold back. Again, whether you've got the bottom leg straight or bent, our action is with knees being stacked on top of each other as best you can. That might mean you have to put a blanket underneath there or prop it with a block. Evenly weighted down through your sit bones, whichever version you're in. Again, you may have to make quite a few adjustments. Option, upright or folding forward, either straight back or rounded back. Choose the one that's right for you. And if you're always going into the same position, the same shape, the same sensation, I'll invite you to explore a little bit deeper. Make something very subtly different and then stay with it and see how it changes, how it adjusts, and how it might alter your thoughts, alter your breath. And if you're resistant to that, ask yourself why. I will settle here. Where if you've gone forward, we'll rise up nice and slow and controlled. Having a pause at the top, notice how sensations are always shifting and moving to different body parts as we move. We'll take a breath or two. And we'll unravel the legs and we'll go to the other side. Take any movement in between sides that you need. And we'll start this time left knee on top of right. See how it feels to have the bottom leg straight, where your comfort is with that. And then if you want to add on, you can bend the bottom leg and come into your shoelace pose. Again, really important that you do take the time to adjust the sit bones. There's, especially in this particular shape, it's very common to have a lean to one sit bone more than the other. And ideally we would like to even that out. And as that evens out, you'll notice how the knees become stacked. If you can't get the knees to stack, chances are you're going to have that quite uneven distribution to the sit bones, and you may have to have a small prop to adjust. So once you get your legs settled, we're going to keep the sit bones down as you decide whether you're going to stay upright or fold forward. And I'll invite you to just, as you come into the shape, review the yamas and go through them, layering them onto the shape that you're in. Starting with non-harming, and then going into truthfulness, going into non-stealing, going into brahmacarya, God's view or moderation, finding just the right amount of sensation. And then last one, apagraha, this idea of letting go of our expectations. Can you let go of the fact that, if you come into a hip opening pose and you're like, oh, my hips are so tight, where does that come from? Like, why do we even need to talk like that to ourselves? Like, tight's not necessarily bad. There's coming back to the black and white. Why is it bad? Why is having tight hips bad? Whoever said that it was. It just means that your hips are tighter than some. It might mean that they're stronger and more stable. It could also mean that there's imbalance in another part of the body. There's tons of reasons. But putting that negative connotation on it is not serving us. Stay, settle on the breath, work your way through the yamas, using them in a layering effect on top of your physical posture. I will hold here for a couple minutes. Last 3 breaths here. And taking the time to rise up carefully. Always having the pause at the top. And then when you feel ready, unraveling the legs. Finding any movement, whether it's windshield wipers, stretching your legs out. Maybe it's turning around and going back into down dog for a few breaths. Now we'll come back to center. I'm going to get you to swing both of your feet to the left-hand side of you. And the legs will be open in deer pose. Again, really important that you're able to evenly weight down through both sit bones. We don't want one sit bone lifted and the other not. That may require props. It may require you shifting and changing the angle of your legs until you can get your sit bones down. It's an external rotation on your right leg. You'll notice that the leg has opened up and away from you. It's an internal rotation on your left leg. This is the one that's probably going to give you the most resistance. You may have to change the angle between your heel and your hip. if you bring your heel closer to you, you may be able to get your left sit bone back down. It may cause issues in the knee. So you're going to find a happy medium between all of that. I'm working on trying to increase my rotation, so I'm going to take my heel quite far away, creating hopefully what will be like a 90-degree angle with both of my legs. That may be an option for you to work on as well. Once you feel like you do have your legs positioned where you can sit tall, even weight through the sit bones, we're going to stay right here. Hands could rest on the knees or they could be on the floor. I'd like you to just stay completely upright for now and think about, maybe with the eyes closed, can you evenly weight shoulders over hips, taking the weight down through the sit bones and shifting and adjusting so that the weight is evenly distributed. And then we'll just close down the eyes and we'll hold here. Fluttering the eyes open if they were closed. We're going to come out of our deer pose, and again, you can take the feet out in front for windshield wipers or any other shape where you can move around, ease out any tension that built up. And of course, we'll go to the other side. Both of your legs and your feet to the right. Even weight down through the sit bones, shoulders stacked over hips. Again, the easiest way to get the sit bone, especially the one that wants to be lifted, to stay down is to change the angle of your back foot. Bringing the heel closer to your hip, you'll get your sit bone back down. If you can keep that, you can experiment with taking your leg or your foot farther away from you, working towards having two 90-degree angles with your legs. The left leg on this side is going to be pretty accessible. Right angle on your back leg will be more challenging if you're continuing to keep the right sit bone rooted. Find a way where you can sit tall and upright. You may have to have a hand to support you, and we'll hold here. Now the yamas and the niyamas are our GPS system. They guide us, let us know when we're off course, and give us something to come back to time and time again. So just like this posture, you're making the decision to participate in the posture. Whenever we make a decision in our day-to-day life, whether it's going to be what you eat for dinner or a conversation that you're going to have, we're making a decision to do it. And you can use the yamas and the niyamas to help figure out how you're going to do it, in what way. And just like this posture, you're going to go through them step by step. And the first one that we always default to is the first ahimsa, non-harming. Is my action going to harm myself? Is it going to harm someone else? Is there another way that I can approach it where that won't be the case? And then number two, am I being truthful? Am I speaking words that are true? Am I honoring my truth? Am I being honest with myself? Non-stealing. Am I taking ideas? Am I taking what somebody else has learned and using it? Or am I having an experience and learning a new skill for myself? Brahmacharya, moderation. Can I step back from the situation? Can I see it as a whole so that I'm not too narrow in my focus or in my beliefs? That's a big one. What I think is right and wrong. And then the last one, apagraha, this surrendering, kind of letting go. Instead of grasping at what we think is true or what is right, can we allow ourselves to see other sides of the coin, other people's points of view, or letting go of our expectations for something that might be unrealistic. Now just check to make sure that your right sit bone especially hasn't lifted. Maybe you've shifted your weight, and try to anchor it back down. We've got a few more breaths to hold here. You can start to ease your legs out of the shape, find movement and release. And we'll end with our caterpillar pose. Legs out in front, always assessing whether you need a little lift of the sit bones or perhaps a rolled up blanket under the knees. Adding as many props out in front to help support you. Again, you can approach the posture with a straight back, coming forward, maintaining your posture, or coming forward with a rounding and a softness like a rag doll that's fallen forward. You might find that one has more benefits for you than the other, or you may need to choose one over another because of an injury or a chronic condition that you're working through. We'll settle in and we'll hold. If you have lost that connection with the sound of your breath, here's an opportunity to come back to it. Listen to the rhythm, allow it to soothe you, and we'll hold. mindfully as you rise up. Always pausing, making small movements, and gathering a prop from around you. Hopefully you have one, whether it's blocks or a bolster, folded blanket, folded towels, whatever you've got. And I'd like us to go into our final Shavasana or rest in a back bend. We didn't do a back bend for our yin practice, so I'd like to add that in now. You can come to the middle of your mat, and if you've got either one block or two, or a bolster, they can go behind you. One can be for your head, one can be for your back. So if you're using a block, it can be on its side. If you're using a bolster, it'll be across your mat. And what I'd like to have us go into is having the bum on the floor of the mat, the prop underneath the mid-back, shoulders on the mat, and then if you need support for your head, either a block or a blanket. So I want the middle of your chest to be the highest part. We're getting into our mid-back, creating a curve or an arch. You can decide how you want your legs, whether they stay bent, straight, butterfly pose, doesn't matter, as long as you're comfortable. So whatever prop you've got, we're going to lower down onto it. And then once you're down, adjust any support that you need for your head. And check to make sure that your bum is on the floor and your shoulders are on the floor and your back has a nice curve into it that you can sustain. And of course, adjusting your feet. They might stay bent, they might want to go straight, or again, butterfly pose if you choose that. And we'll stay here, arms in any shape. Nice, slow, deep, even breaths. begin to deepen the breath, and you may need to adjust the placement of your legs. And we'll slide the prop out from underneath our back, however you can safely do that. Once the prop has been removed, we'll let the spine settle onto the floor. Give it at least 2 to 3 cycles of breath. And then drawing the knees into the chest, hugging, squeezing, perhaps rocking a little bit side to side. And from here, either rocking forward and back or rolling to one side and pressing up, we'll meet in our upright position, cross-legged if we can. The yamas are like a GPS. They're tools that we can use to guide our decisions, to guide the way we think, the way we move, the way we approach new or old situations. And it's just like a filter that you apply. And if you can't remember them, that's okay. Over time, they'll become more ingrained, and you'll know which ones you need to filter with the most for yourself. The rule of thumb is always to start at non-harming. Is there any way you can do what you're going to do in a way that doesn't cause harm to yourself or to others? And if that's a resounding yes, then you can layer that with the other yamas and niyamas on top of that. And even if you just practice that one, you're gonna see a real shift in how you act and how you receive. So thank you so much for allowing me to guide your practice. I hope you enjoy it. If you want to ask questions or have a conversation, always super excited to have a conversation. Email, messenger, Instagram, phone, whatever works for you. Oh, thank you. Namaste. Enjoy the rest of your day.